Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I just want to give it a couple more moments just to see if we do have any more people join, but we will start shortly. Well, everyone, let's start there. So again, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about user management. Now, I'm sure you're all well aware by now, my name's Milo and I'm part of the support team. And today I'm going to be going over how you can create new users within Workbooks and what to do when a user changes their name or decides to move elsewhere. As you know, we're doing a series of webinars every other Wednesday at 4 p.m. On the screen, you can see where our journey has started and what we have coming up for the next couple. We also run a 2-day training course for system admins and reporting where we go into a lot more depth. And if you do want more information about these courses, you can reach out to your account manager or email training@workbooks.com. With that said, let's go over what we'll be covering today. So to begin with, what I'll be covering is what you need to know and what you need to check before creating your new users. From there, I'll show you how to create a user within Workbooks, how to change a user's name, and then what to do when a user leaves. As ever, there'll be questions, time for questions afterwards, and this session will be recorded so that you can come back to it and refer to it later. There are a couple of things that I won't be covering today, though I will be mentioning them. If you're using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, you'll have the ability to allow users to sign into Workbooks without needing to provide a username and password, giving you greater control and security. It's also possible to create new user templates so that any new Active Directory users can be given a Workbooks account without your system admin needing to do any of the initial setup. More information about how you can do this can be found on our knowledge base by searching either for Microsoft Azure Active Directory or using the URL that you can see on the screen. You can also set up Google Authentication, which adds another layer of security as it uses a two-step verification. Again, while I won't be going into it, you can find more information on our knowledge base about it. But it's good for you guys to know that if you do want to look into using either of these, you would need to have the advanced security module. Now, when you are creating new users, one thing you'll also want to set up is which user groups they're part of, which indicates the capabilities and permissions that they'd have. I am going to show you how you can add a user to a user group, but in our next webinar, we'll show you how to add and remove capabilities to and from the user group. So, what do you need to know before creating a new user? You'll need to check if you have the available licenses, the correct modules enabled, and if you have the available extensions. These can be checked within Workbooks, and I'll show you how to do it later, but it is within the configuration. And if you do need any additional licenses or modules, your account manager would be able to help with that. But once you've checked to see that you have the modules that you need, you'll need to confirm that they've been enabled. Examples of modules you may have could be the mapping module, multiple currencies, or the exchange sync. Any modules that you have are applied on an account level, not a database level. Let's say you've got two databases, one that handles UK business and another one that handles international customers. For this, you need to have the multiple currency module enabled, which would then show on both databases. Now, if you are unsure about any modules you have and would like to check if they can be disabled, I would suggest reaching out to us on support, and we would be able to have a look and let you know if they can be disabled. Before moving on to creating a new user, I want to take a couple of moments just to talk about security and authentication. Apologies, I've gone to the wrong slide. No, sorry, apologies for that. Actually, when it comes to licenses, each active user would need to have their own license to use within Workbooks, and these are allocated on a user's profile. You can see which license they have, and you can also see and edit which extensions they have within their user profile. Now I'd like to talk about security and authentication. System admins are able to control the password policy of your users. This means you can set up how complex passwords need to be and how often they expire. If you have the advanced security module, you can allow users to authenticate using Microsoft and Google. As I mentioned earlier, I won't be going into the details of this, but you can find the information on our knowledge base. You can also set up additional security, so when someone logs in from a new IP address or a device, they'll receive an email with a link so they can confirm that the device they are using. For all of these are on an account level, but you can also control these on a user level. For example, while you may have Microsoft authentication set up, you may have a contractor who's not part of your network, so you could allow them to sign into Workbooks using a password. Now, let's start looking at creating a new user. Within the Workbooks configuration, when you create a new user, there'll be required fields that need to be completed. Once these have been filled out and you save it, if you have the login enabled ticked, apologies, misclicked. If you have the login enabled ticked, they'll receive an email asking them to activate their account, which would look like this. There may be times where you know that someone will be starting soon, but their work email address is not yet live. You can still create them as a user, but just untick this box. And when they do start, you can go in and tick login enabled. When you save it, they will then be sent the activation email. As they would have created their password, as you would have created their password for them when they first log in, you'd need to provide this to them securely. Now, if you do have multiple databases, when you create a new user, they'll automatically have access to the database where you created them. You'd need to grant them access to any other databases that they may need. This can be particularly useful if you have a training database along with your main database. If you create your user on the training database, they'll have access to that training database. And then once the training has finished, you can grant them access to your main database. You may also have multiple own organizations. If you do, when I'm demonstrating how to create a new user, I'll show you what you need to do. Occasionally, there'll be times when you need to change a user's name. This could be because their name may have changed, or you may have it may have been mistyped, which is probably something that I would do. When you do this, you'd need to open up their user profile and type in their new or corrected name into the full name field. Once you save this change, their name will be updated everywhere that takes their name from their user profile. Any email signatures that you've created would need to be updated. Plus, if you have any custom fields that use people records, these records would need to be updated. You could have a situation where you've got a report and you've manually added the user's name as part of a formula. When you do have this, you would need to go in and change the formula in the report. If the user's email address has changed as well as their name, you'd need to update the login email field. When you do this, the user will be sent an email to the new address asking them to confirm the change. And they would need to click the link before they can log in with the new address. So make sure you point this out to them. There'll be times when one of your users moves on to different pastures. When this happens, you'd need to think about any records that are assigned to them. Any closed records can stay assigned to them, though you may want to think about bulk reassigning any active records they have. We'll be doing a future webinar about bulk actions in case you're unsure how to do this, so keep an eye out for it. Within the Leavers user profile, you'll need to disable their login. And this is done by unticking the login enabled checkbox. You would also need to change their license to the no addition sign in disabled, and any extensions that they have would also need to be removed. If you forgot to remove any extensions, even if they don't have a license, these would still count towards the extension usage, as Ashley had mentioned on our last webinar. Once you save your changes, records that are assigned to the users will still stay assigned to them, but their name will no longer appear within the assigned to pick list. As I mentioned, if there are any active records, you can reassign them. I do want to point out that you should not change the name of a leaver to a new user. If you do, all records would then be assigned to that new person, including records that were closed before that person had joined. Something else that you shouldn't do is delete a user. This can have an impact both on the assigned records and if you have the audit module enabled, changes that user has made. Now, I'm sure you want to see how to do all of this. So let me jump into Workbooks and start showing you. So here I'm in Workbooks, and the marketing manager has come up to me and said that there have been a couple of changes on their team. They have a new starter that's joining and would like them to be set up in Workbooks as a marketing executive. They've also mentioned that Caroline Sterling has recently married, so would need to change their surname from Sterling to Archer, and their work email has also been updated. Finally, Dylan Jackson has changed position, so would no longer need access to Workbooks, so their account would need to be disabled. Now, as I said, first thing that I would need to check is in regards to licenses and extensions. So to do that, if I go to my start, go down to configuration, and within my account settings, I go to my licenses and modules. Now, if I then go to the tab of license usage, you can see that I've got a list of all of the licenses and modules that are enabled. Now, obviously, in your own database, you're going to see a lot fewer options than this, because I am using our demo database at the moment. But the main things that you can see is not just the name, but you can also see the current users, so how many there are, how many licenses you have, and how many are unused. Something else that you can do within here is if you want to see who has a particular module or license assigned to them, If you click the little plus here, and I'll do this for the Event Pro edition, it will then give you a list of all the users that have that assigned to them. This is particularly useful if you're in a situation where you've noticed that there is a license or an extension that has been over allocated and you want to see where it is. Now, I also talked about how system admins can set up passwords. This can be done by going into my account settings and going to the authentication. And if I then click on my password policy, you can see that it gives me the options of how complex the password needs to be. And there are lots of, and you do have the control here. Plus, you can also say how often a password would need to be changed. Something else is if a user does forget their password, you can make sure that the forgot password is ticked, and that means that when they first log in, they're able to use that. Now, since I've now had a look and I know what licenses are available and what my password policies are, let's start actioning what my marketing manager actually wants me to do. So I'm going to close this, and in my configuration, I'm going to go to my users and security and select my users. Now, first, I want to create my new user. So to do this, I've got my new user button here. And if I click that, I get this screen pop up. So let me just go in and start filling all of this in. So bear with me as I do. Now, so I've filled in my login email. I've got my login enabled ticked. I need to add my password. Now, this would be a password that I would set first of all, so that they can then initially log in. And then I would just need to repeat it. And obviously, I've also got my change password at next sign in ticked. If I wanted them to just have that same password, I can untick that. Now, when I scroll down, I've got my allocated edition where it's selected the Events Pro edition. If I wanted to change that, I could just change it here, but I'm going to keep it as the Events Pro, and it is already enabled some of the modules for me. Now, earlier I'd mentioned about own organizations, and if you do have multiple own organizations, you would need to set your default. So before you can select it down here, because as you can see, I've got nothing, I need to go to my tab of own organizations, apologies for that, and go add own organization, and I'd select the one that I'd want. So once I save and close, you can see it's been added there. And if I go back to my main tab, it's now there for me to select. So I've got everything set up. For the moment, I'm just going to save. Should happen shortly. Fortunately, it's been a bit slow. I do apologize. And there we go. Now, I did also mention I'd show you how to add someone to particular user groups. Within their profile, as you can see, I've got the Groups tab. If I go here, they're automatically signed up to the Everyone group. And whenever you create a new user, they're always added to this group. But if I want to add more, I just go to my Add Groups, and I'm going to select the Marketing Executive and go Save and Close. Then I'm going to go back to my main and save. And that's it. That's how you would set up a new user. Now, I'd also mentioned that we had someone that would need to change their name. and that was Caroline Sterling. So to go through the steps of that, I'm going to show you guys. I've brought up Caroline's user profile, where first what I would do is simply change Caroline Sterling to Caroline Archer. And if I wanted to change her email address as well, I would do it here. For this example, I'm not going to show you how you do it, but you can see how you can do that. Now, what would happen is if I was to go through and change the email address, what would happen is when I save the record, let me just put Sterling back. When I go save and close, and then when I come back to it, what would happen is that next to Caroline's email address, it would show pending confirmation. This is to indicate that she has received that new email, and she would just need to click the link that I'd shown. So let me just wait for this to save. What I'll do is, since this is taking longer than normal, what I'm going to do is just go back to my user configuration. And I'd mentioned earlier that Dylan has changed position, so no longer needs access to workbooks. So to make that change, what I'd do is go into Dylan Jackson's user profile. I would simply untick the login enabled. I would change the allocated edition to no edition sign-in denied. And I would unselect the allocated extensions. Once I've done that, I'd simply just go save and close. I would get this message. What I can simply do is just go no, because that's simply asking if I met. That's just wanting to check, was I sure that I wanted to disable that user, and did I want to just go back and undo what I did? But as you can now see, Dylan is now grayed out, indicating that they're no longer an active user. And that's it. So just to recap for you guys, when it comes to user management, it's always useful to view your available licenses and modules. When we think about security, you can set up what your password policy is and also how often it would expire. And you can also look into allowing users to log in using Microsoft and Google authentication. But again, with those, you would need the advanced security module. When you're creating new users, you need to make sure that you're assigning the licenses and the extensions when you're setting them up. And when a user no longer needs access to workbooks, you always need to remember to disable their login and remove any licenses and extensions. And so that's it. So let's see if we've got any questions. Just having a quick look here. So I've got a question that's just come in. What happens to reports and processes that run as the user that you've disabled? Now, what I'm going to do for that one, let me just jump back into Workbooks, and I'm going to pick one of the other ones, and I'm just going to just remove their edition just so you guys can actually see what the message is when it comes up. But it does refer to that, it does say here that any reports or processes that are configured as that user would no longer work. And it also says that any scheduled emails used by that user would also be disabled. So they would not be able to, so any of those would need to be redone. Okay. So I've got another question here from Tomislav. Do WES licenses have any additional requirements to be met before assigning them? Now, with the WES license, that when you do have it, obviously you would need to have, with the modules, you'd need to make sure that you have the module enabled. And in regards to the licenses for that, you would need to make sure that you have enough for all the users that would be using the Exchange Sync. I've got another question from Martin. Why are only certain allocated extensions automatically selected when creating a new user? Now with that one, Martin, I believe that's tied also to the license that they've actually got, that within, if you assign a certain license, it would have certain modules included. But as you can get modules that are not included with the license, then you'd have the option to actually add or remove certain ones. One example of that would actually be the Exchange Sync license, that since it's not included automatically, it would be a separate module. Hopefully that's answered your question for you, Martin. And it looks like that's it for the questions. So I want to thank everyone for coming. The next webinar that we have is in regards to capabilities and permissions that I had mentioned, and that's going to be on the 17th of September. In the meantime, if you do need any help, you can always check our knowledge base by either going to workbooks.com/help or by clicking the question mark icon. Alternatively, if you are an authorized support contact, you can reach out to us on supports, either by email, by phone, or using the case portal, or alternatively, you can always just contact your account manager and they'll be able to help. But thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to seeing you next time.